Hello everyone, this is Ipshita Chakraborty and today I'll be taking you through the journey of this presentation based on sexual harassment at workplace training, commonly known as POSH. We will study the significance and the impact and the various segments of the Act in this training. For the first slide, we will be studying what is the actual meaning and the motive of this Act. To say, in the year 2013, the Indian legislature adopted the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, commonly known as Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act. This act is commonly known as the POSH Act. The act had a monumental effect on the Indian legal landscape. It became the first legislation that was drafted to deal with the workplace sexual harassment of women. The Act made the employer responsible for creating a safe working environment. This meant that, given the context of one's workplace, the management was responsible for preventing, prohibiting, and offering due redressing towards any incident of sexual harassment. To sum up, the POSH Act was crafted in a manner that would provide the utmost protection of any women who faces sexual harassment either in the workplace or by any employee, client, or even a third-party contractor associated to her workplace. Therefore, we can say that under the Sexual Harassment Act, it is considered to be a violation of the fundamental rights of a woman, inclusive of a woman's right to live with dignity while performing any trade, profession, or business. In the actual words, thus, POSH Act sexual harassment is defined as sexual harassment includes unwelcome sexually tinted behavior whether directly or by implication, such as physical contact, demand for request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of a sexual nature. Coming to the slide of verbal sexual harassment, we can say that sexual harassment in a work environment refers to repeated and continuous behaviors of a sexual nature, including comments, touching, sending, or posting photos and literature like emails or requests. Example, a superior asking an employee for a sex or a date. Verbal sexual harassment refers to any of the above behaviors that are said out loud either to a person directly, near them, or about them. This can look like inappropriate sexual comments said about your appearance to colleagues, sexually suggestive emails sent to your work account, and lewd requests for discs or sexual favors. All of these are a type of sexual harassment that are a violation of the victim's civil rights. Now, coming to the examples of verbal sexual harassment, we can say that this caused a hostile work environment in order to be taken seriously in the legal world. Unfortunately, some one-time instances might not hold much merit to it, but somehow we can say that these are a few of the segments which are examples of verbal harassment, like jokes, innuendos, racial, sexist or homographic slurs, name calling, condensing talk, or insults. Coming to non-verbal sexual harassment, these things may include like staring at someone, that is undressing someone with one's eyes, blowing kisses, winking, or licking one's lips in a suggestive manner. Non-verbal sexual harassment also includes printed material, for example, displaying sexually oriented pictures or cartoons, using sexually oriented screensavers on one's computer, or sending sexually oriented notes, letters, or faxes or email. Also, to state that non-verbal harassment, as we have shown, offensive gestures like staring, leering with an intention to discomfort the other party, trying to corner the other party at the workforce for sexual advances include the examples of non-verbal harassment. Now, physical harassment is an act where someone inappropriately touched you against your will. Physical harassment in the workplace is also known as workplace violence. Physical harassment behavior intimidates, embarrasses, threatens, and makes the victim uncomfortable. The most common forms related to physical harassment includes sexual assault or abuse or sexual rape, inappropriately touching or grabbing someone, for example, touching someone's breast unintentionally, using intimidating gestures, deliberately brushing or rubbing your body against someone, blocking another employee movements, kissing or hugging someone inappropriately, unwelcome touching of another person's hair, clothes, or body. Visual harassment is a situation where the individual exposes themselves to another person without the consent of the victim and the act affected their performance or attitude. Example of visual harassment includes exposing of private parts, sending sexual images or videos to another person, for instance, sending pornographic videos to another person through a social website without informing the person, unwelcome gestures to another person, staring at someone else's body offensively and making the person feel uncomfortable, placing a poster with information related to sexual behaviors, exposing someone else's offensive pictures or images without their consent, displaying nasty messages or content from a website, book, or magazine. Now we have taken a case study, say for example a harassment scenario 1, as you can see here. Let us describe this case study in a bit detail and then I'll be explaining what it actually means. It is said over here that Arvind and Sugana are part of a team at an organization. Sugana reports to Arvind, which means that Arvind is Sugana's boss. Arvind constantly tells Sugana that they should go out somewhere after work hours, perhaps for a late night movie or dinner. Sugana is uncomfortable but smiles and says she is busy most often. One day, Arvind tells Sugana that if she turns down his request again, her ratings will go down in her monthly review. So, is this sexual harassment or not? My answer, dear fellows, is that this is simply a case of sexual harassment. Let me explain why. Because as you can see here, Arvind is Sugana's boss and by any means after their work hours, if Sugana wants to go or doesn't want to go, it's not a fault of hers. She might be having work or she might feel uncomfortable, as is the case that she is not willing to actually go with Arvind. But if any woman or a girl in the workplace is not comfortable to go out with a stranger or their boss, sometimes after work hour, be it a movie or a dinner, it is not an urge to tell the employee or your colleague that the ratings or it will somehow affect your work loads. As the case may be over here that Arvind actually threatens Sugana that her ratings will go down, which means that there will be a direct impact on her performance appraisal and it will be manipulated somehow by Arvind and threatening Sugana that if she doesn't go out, this will be her case. So purely this is a case of sexual harassment where Arvind is threatening Sugana to take part in his motives, otherwise she will be in trouble. But in this case, the duty of Sugana is to directly go and report it to the HR manager or whoever is there in her direct charge of the POSH Act, because in every cell of workplace there is surely this kind of act, persons who are responsible for dealing with such cases. So it is liable for Sugana to go and have their attention and report this case. Now, in coming to the harassment scenario 2, let me read it out once again. Abhi was entering the elevator and Ashutosh came up from behind and tapped on her shoulders and told her, that she looked hot in the red dress. Abhi felt uncomfortable and stared at Ashutosh and told him to keep his hands off and use discretion in his language. Ashutosh apologized and it never happened again. So, is Abhi being sexually harassed by Ashutosh? So, from the picture, as we can see, that Abhi was the woman who was entering the elevator, and Ashutosh, being her friend or colleague or neighbor, actually approached her from her back and tapped on her shoulders, which is an evidence of physical contact, and gave certain remarks as how she looked in the dress, at which Abhi felt uncomfortable and stared at Ashutosh and told him to keep his hands off and also to use discretion in his language. So after this, it never happened again, which is shown that with the intention that Ashutosh was actually touching Abhi. It was not just happening because of their relation, but it was something that Abhi felt uncomfortable. So because of that, she had said him to mind his language and keep his hands off. So after that, Ashutosh never made it happen again. So though this was actually a case which was turning sexually harassment, but after the warning which Abhi gave to Ashutosh, it is said that it never happened again. So we can assume here from the picture also that Ashutosh was being sorry to Abhi, and after that maybe he realized his mistake and Abhi was kept safe and Ashutosh never interfered again. So being turned from a sexually harassment case, it is shown here that Abhi dealt with the case very tactfully with a smartness gesture, of course. In case of harassment scenario 3, let me read it out once again. Suman sent across pictures of some scantily clad woman to Joe. Joe requested Suman not to send him such obscene pictures in the future, as she was not comfortable with the same. But Suman continued. Is this an example of hostile environment, which is being sexually harassment? So, as the case may be, we can see here that Suman, being a man, is sending some scantily clad women pictures to Joe. However, Joe requested Suman not to continue with his act of his, and perhaps she was not comfortable with the same. But Suman kept on sending such scantily pictured women to Joe, but Joe was there uncertain what to do or what to go for the next step. So over here we can see the condition of Joe, that she is being actually harassed by a visual harassment case by Suman. But although she knows that it is some sort of thing which is not right in the case, but maybe she is not certain as what to do. But to make sure, in such cases it is evident to either complain your neighbors or the work environment scenario. If it is better to report it to your higher authorities, be it your boss or the other persons who are responsible in charge of you, or the sexual harassment cell, of course, or even in case of your nearby locality, or as an awareness, you should also report it to the liable authorities. So being this an example of sexual harassment, whereby Joe should have taken steps much earlier, but still though Suman continued with sending those pictures, it was a bit late for Joe to take the steps. But yes, if you had been in this place, this is what you should have done, being a woman. Now, coming to the policy of the management of POSH, we will be underlining these following points. Say, under the POSH Act, an employee is legally required to comply with certain statutory requirements. One of this constitution of an internal complaints committee, known as ICC, is a body envisaged to receive complaints on sexual harassment at the workplace from an aggrieved woman as well as to inquire into and make recommendations to the employer on the action required pursuant to his inquiry of such complaint made. So, the following discussion actually highlights key aspects that must be borne in mind by an employer seeking to constitute an ICC, that is, actually we can say an internal committee, as you can see here from the flowchart, that is required to take the POSH Act into consideration. Like any establishment employing 10 or more employees is required to constitute an ICC by an order in writing by the employer. However, this numerical threshold has not been explicitly stated amongst clauses of the POSH Act pertaining to the formation and working of the ICC. However, in this regard, it must be noted that the definition of employee under an POSH Act is broad and encompasses persons employed on a temporary, ad hoc or daily wage basis that includes apprentices, trainings, volunteers and persons employed at a workplace through an agent or contractor. So the constitution of ICC actually is like the department related parliamentary standing committee on human resources development, known as parliamentary committee, has analyzed and proposed anti-sexual harassment legislation at a bill stage and made several recommendations on the law after taking into consideration inputs from various stakeholders and the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So it is generally stated that the POSH committee should actually have presiding officer, external member, employee members, whereby there are also some positions for disqualifications of member, like if the person has been convicted of an inquiry pending against him, or if the person has been found guilty, or whereby the person has abused their position, rendering their continued membership is to be of public interest. So, in occurrence of this above grounds, the applicable members would have to step down and be replaced with individuals possessing suitable qualifications as applicable to the relevant category of membership. So, this is actually the structure which an internal committee of a management for POSH actually has. And regarding to that, there is a different kind of steps which are there for filling a complaint process, like what will be the time duration, like within 3 months they have to complain it to the ICC, within 7 days they will be notifying the respondent and getting response. If the respondent agrees to proceed with the case, that is to settle or go for punishment for the person who has done the case, then there will be action within 60 days, or there will be an inquiry session for 90 days, and based on the findings and recommendations, the management for POSH will be taking their decisions. Now in this slide there are a few facts which are based on workplace harassment, that is 1 out of 4 employees in the workplace is a woman, 2 out of 5 women have experienced sexual harassment at workplace, and 2 out of 3 organizations don't have a proper structure to address sexual harassment. So with this comes actually the necessary for the POSH Act, which has been implemented in 2013, as you can see, and with that the strengthening of this act has come to protect the rights of the women at workplace and prevent their harassment or violations in any of this sort. And this is how it is actually motivating to have a proper behavior at the workplace and have an encouraging boosting productivity. Now coming to the steps of filing any sexual harassment case under the POSH Act, there are the following methods which you can undergo to state that the POSH Act makes the district officer responsible for implementing preventive guidelines, but it is equally important for LCC and nodal officer to not just be a part of the redressal machinery but also the preventive measures. The LCC needs to make women aware about LCC members and their contact details so that women can file complaints without any hassle. The first person an aggrieved woman approaches for filing a complaint is nodal officer. If the nodal officer at that time only informs the woman of the procedure that will be taken for redressal, it will help her make an informed choice if she wants to settle the matter in an informal way, that is like warning the respondent or conciliation, or opt for the formal route given by the act, that is either to punish or to have some fees extracted from the party. Currently, under the law, it is the duty of district officer that the members of the complaints committee are trained. A nodal officer is the link between the complainant and the LCC, and thus it is important that he should also be involved in the capacity building and training sessions organized for LCC. Now, to have the confidence and win the segments of the management level, we have the following few modules which can be stated to have a safe working environment. The main objective of the POSH training is to sensitize the employees about sexual harassment and the legalities associated with it. Since there is a legal angle involved, it is very important that the training accurately reflects the principles and directions enunciated by the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act. It can be tricky to identify a training provider who can ensure legal accuracy of the content. Like it is said that the topic of sexual harassment is very sensitive and the legalities involved can make it very complex, and it is very important that the courses are engaging and interactive. This will help the learners in their comprehension and knowledge retention. It is said that one size doesn't fit all. The expectations towards POSH compliance at workplace vary depending on the role of the employees perform in the organization. For example, the responsibilities of people managers will be different to that of individual contributors and IC members. This makes it very important that the training caters to the exact role played by the employee in the industry. Also, it may lead to a disconnection between the content and the learners, and thus affecting the effectiveness of the POSH training. So, you can always go for customization of courses as said by the management, and the first and foremost thing is not to ignore the complaints which come from the women or anyone harassed by it. It is always expected to be supportive to the person before any action is taken, or be sure that the behavior is not repeated in the workplace, and be it major or minors, it is always essential to report the incident and take it down in your notes, because it is always better to have a written application and the document for any complaints, because of the future generation might always have a look at it, and the office bearers will have a case study of it made out of it when the time comes. So it is better not to ignore the application which has come and to take the matter seriously into hands of the management. So with this we have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you for your patient hearing and listening.